Hello, podcast listeners. June marks 1517's annual Podcast Network fundraiser. For many listeners, the 1517 Podcast Network is the first place they've heard real gospel proclamation that says, you are forgiven, not because you've earned it, but because Christ already has. In order to keep delivering that message across our network, we are working on raising $200,000, and we're halfway there, thanks to a group of generous donors who have already given us $100,000. Now we need your help to match their efforts. This fundraiser will support the future of the network and help us move more of our podcast content onto video platforms. This way, even more people can see and hear the good news. If 1517's podcasts have helped you, now is a great time to help us. Visit 1517.org/donate-podcasts and support the work of proclaiming Christ for you across the podcast network.
Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go over to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. While you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing, academies. Chad's going to be working on a new academy this week. The week that we're recording this, he's going to be working on a new one. Now, it'll be a little while before that's released, but, get ready. Start anticipating. And then, of course, when it comes out, sign up for it. In fact, maybe you need to sign up for Chad's other academy right now. Take that, and then maybe by the time you're done with that, you'll have another one to take. While you're taking all these academies or whatever else you're doing over at 1517, of course, you want to go to that right-hand corner, click that donate link, and then you can become a contributor and help make all those academies free. How are we making those and putting them out there for free? Well, because people like you chipping in, supporting the work. We very much appreciate those of you who do that. Chad, we are in Isaiah chapter 26. We got through the first 16 verses or so. The paths are needing to be made straight. That's what this is about. The paths of the righteous are going to be made straight. We see the Lord lifting up people who need to be lifted up, and casting down those who need to be casted down.
Yeah, I think it's Augustine. Probably a lot of people have said this, but I think I read it first in Augustine that as water flows downhill to fill the low places. And so God lowers us, humbles us, not to make us worthy, but to make us basically ready to receive the water of grace that he pours on us. So, that happens all over Isaiah, all over the scriptures. And it's happened here in Isaiah 26. And I think where we left off this discussion last time was around verse 16, where we have this, I guess you could call it a prayer, a very short prayer. O Lord, in distress, they sought you. They poured out a whispered prayer when your discipline was upon them. So we got them whispering their prayers. They're in distress. It's all because of this discipline. And then he switches the image from being in distress and discipline to a very familiar biblical image. We have this used in lots of different ways all over the Old and New Testament. Jesus uses this, the prophets use this. You find this in the Psalms. And it's the image of a pregnant woman who is full term and is in labor and is about to give birth. So Jesus uses this. He talks about, of course, the pains of travail, and then after those have ended, there's joy over the birth of a child. Sometimes prophets will use this image of like men who are unnaturally writhing like they're in labor pains. And here it's used in a little bit different way. This is the only place where you find this in the scriptures. He says, like a pregnant woman who writhes and cries out in her pangs when she is near to giving birth, so were we because of you, O Lord. He's speaking, of course, here of the community. They were suffering. They were in distress. And so they're like crying out and they're writhing like this woman who's about to give birth. So were we. We writhed. And then he goes on to say, nothing happened. we have given birth to wind, which is quite a memorable metaphor. We went through all of this pain, all of this travail to give birth, and what came out? Well, nothing. We just gave birth to wind. And then he switches from, so that's kind of your parable, if you will, your metaphor, an extended simile, whatever you want to call it. And then right after that, he explains what he means. So metaphor, explanation. And the explanation is this: we have accomplished no deliverance in the earth, and the inhabitants of the world have not fallen. In other words, what we gave, this wind that we gave birth to, is an image for us bringing forth no deliverance for ourselves. In other words, we went through all this, we had this pain, all this travail, all these birth pangs, and in the end, we didn't bring forth anything because sinners can't save themselves. We can't deliver ourselves. Hope and deliverance and redemption have got to come from someone outside of us.
Well, the key word in this sentence is we, right?
Yes.
We have accomplished no things. So we went through, a lot of pain, a lot of anguish, a lot of turmoil. The end of it all is that we accomplished nothing. And that's the key thing here, is that, you cannot achieve your own salvation, your own deliverance, and nothing like that. This is a fruitless endeavor. It doesn't mean that, while you're trying to accomplish this grand thing, that there will be immense turmoil and suffering. That is for sure true. God can and does, work things together for good. You don't possess this at all. Your ability to turn bad things into good things doesn't exist. And so, that's
usually it's the opposite, right?
Yeah, they just make them
bad
worse.
things into good things. Good things into bad things.
Yeah, God gives you a good thing. Now you do possess the ability to turn that into something terrible. But this is just some people trying to save themselves. Has never happened. Will never happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think where this kind of intersects with our lives the most is when people think, they're suffering and they think they're kind of atoning for their sins. Mm-hmm. I'm helping Jesus out here. I know he's effected atonement, but look at how much pain and suffering I've endured, and this has got to count for something. So this is me sort of adding my little bit to the salvation, atoning for my sins. And it doesn't work that way. Certainly God uses your sufferings, of course he does, but not to add to the atonement of Jesus. That's taken care of. And then we have a perfect transition, because the very next verse, which is verse 19, says that there is going to be redemption. There is going to be, in this case, resurrection, in fact, all the way to life again. And it's going to happen because of what God does. So verse 19, one of the passages, if you're talking resurrection and the afterlife and the hope to come from the Old Testament perspective, this is one of the verses that people always go to, along with Daniel 12 and some others. Your dead shall live. Their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. So great play upon the earlier image of we as a pregnant woman writhing and giving birth to wind, and here we hear of another birth. It's the earth who is, as it were, opening her womb to give birth to the dead in this resurrection birthday for all people, in which their bodies shall rise from the dust. The dew, as the dew of light, I think is just a perfect way of expressing this, because dew coming down from heaven, giving life to the earth as it waters it, and light, of course, is an image for life itself. They kind of combine these two together in this picture of the life that springs forth from the earth. It's worth saying, I've been thinking about this more and more over the last probably, 2 or 3 years. I kind of, early on, I suppose, I bought into this idea, kind of almost unquestionably, that, in the Old Testament, you really don't hear much about the afterlife or resurrection until much, much later in the Old Testament narrative. I mean, that's kind of your Google it sometime, and that's the answer that you'll find all over the place. Yeah, it wasn't until very, very late in the Old Testament where you have a rising, and usually people will say from outside influence, this perception that there is a life to come, that there is the possibility of resurrection. And people will point to passages like Daniel 12 for this. And I 100% reject that now. I think, in fact, that from the very beginning, in fact, this was part of the hope of Israel. I've got ran across this great quote from Alec Mateer, where it's real short. Just let me read it. He says, "The evolutionary supposition that the Old Testament thought progressed from poor beginnings to brilliant endings has led to the conclusion that this doctrine of death and resurrection must be late. How insubstantial is all this? The Egyptians had an intricate theology of life after death centuries before Isaiah. Even Canaanite religion, for all its brutishness, depended on the annual triumph of Baal over death. In the name of all logic, how could Israel, with its foundational belief in the living God, lack what others arrived at by wishful thinking and natural religion?" So,
That's good.
you've got the Egyptians, they believe in an afterlife. You got the Canaanites, they believe in an afterlife. And you really think that Israel, who has the revelation of God, is much later on going to stumble upon this idea? I mean, it's preposterous. So, like Jesus said, at the very burning bush, God testified to the reality of the resurrection. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He's not the God of the dead, but of the living.
Yeah,
but this
absolutely.
is a great text for kind of this foundational belief in resurrection from the Old Testament.
Well, and this is the thing. So you have all this. We went through all this stuff, and we could not give birth to any sort of salvation or deliverance. And it turns out what you need is a promise. You need a proclamation, right? So, verse 18, hey, we are futile. Verse 19, you have God breaking in and saying, well, let me give you this word. Okay, you've told me what you tried to do and how that worked out. Now let me tell you what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's perfect transition there from our inability to God's not only ability but certainty of working our redemption and the hope that we have in resurrection. All right, then he wraps up this chapter with two more verses, which actually are going to pull upon images, I think, from earlier narratives in the Scriptures, in particular from the flood narrative, Genesis 6 through 9, in particular the closing of the door of the ark, and then also from the Exodus, or rather from the Passover, when the people go into their homes and they shut the doors behind them, doors which are painted with Passover blood. So 20 and 21 read like this: "Come, my people, into your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until the fury," that could also be translated curse, "until the fury or the curse has passed by. For behold, the Lord is coming out from his place to punish," literally to visit, but to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. "And the earth will disclose the blood shed on it, and will no more cover its slain." Actually, I think there's another, I just thought of this, I think there's another Old Testament narrative behind this, Genesis 4, where you have the blood of Abel crying out from the ground. So yeah, we started this chapter by the verse 2 saying, "Open the gates," so people going in. And now we're going to end the chapter with people shutting the doors behind them. Why are they shutting the doors behind them? Because you're about to have this, we would say, final judgment. God is going to pay a visit to the earth, and you're going to have this punishment of those who have rejected him. And at the same time, of course, when his fury or the curse has passed by, there's going to be redemption for his own. So shutting the doors behind you, of course, God shut the door of the ark after Noah, his family, and all the animals were aboard. The Israelites shut the doors when they were in Egypt when the angel of death passed by. And that verb for pass by at the very end of 20, until the fury or the curse has passed by, that same verb that occurs in Exodus to describe God passing by the homes of the Israelites, Exodus 12:12. So God shows up, and his people are safe, they're secure, and this little while of judgment is going to pass. And then, implicit in this is that after this has happened, they can come forth, because they will usher forth into now a place in which they are safe and at peace, because God has done his work of redemption.
Yeah, I mein the Passover imagery here is like pretty stark, right? I mean, you're saying there. So, in the Passover, you'd say, get in your house, make sure you got that blood above the door, and just stay in there, right? Like, you're going to stay in there all night, and then God's going to do what he's going to do. Here, it's so enter your chambers. This spring has been like the stormiest spring I can remember, like where I live. Maybe where you live too, Chad. I think most of those storms have come up through, like, it just, the amount of rain, the amount of like warm weather and cold air like clashing, and we've had crazy amounts of tornadic activity, like way more than I remember. We always have some in the spring, but it's been pretty wild this year. And every time that happens, and it's happened a lot, which is why it's fresh in my mind, you have the meteorologist, and he's on there, and he's got his charts, and he's showing you, like, all the things. Oh, we can see debris here, and look at that, we have circulation here. And eventually he'll call out an area, and he'll tell you, hey, if you're in this area right here between this highway and this town, you need to get in your safe space. Mm-hmm. That's what it'll tell you. Like, you got to get in your safe space, man. Like, wherever that is. You got a cellar, you got a basement, whatever it is, bathroom, wherever the best place for you to be, you got to get there, because something's coming. This is how that reads to me. That he's like, all right, you got to get in your safe space. And of course, like he says, come my people. Like, so where is their safe? He is their safe space. So hey, you got to get in me. Like, you stop saving yourself and all this kind of nonsense. So you got to get with me, and I'm going to shut that door behind you, just like the days of the Exodus when the angel of the Lord passed by. But the safe space here is not like the call to go into, as it was in Exodus, a literal house. But to call the people to get, you need to get with me, right? You need to get with God, so that the judgment will pass you by.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, he is the safe space, right? When the judgment comes, when the storm drops, and there's going to be destruction. Well, there's one safe place, and that's with the Lord of the storm. Yeah, he's the one who's going to keep you safe, and that's a great way to end the chapter, chapter 26. And to transition into actually some more good news. We're going to get to some more not so good news chapters down the road, but right now, chapter 27 has some great stuff in it. It's got some law, but it's got a lot of gospel too. So we'll pick that up now. I'm just going to read the opening verse, because we're gonna hear about serpents and dragons and Leviathan right away, and then he's going to, as Isaiah loves to do, evidently, he's going to radically pivot to another image, a vineyard image. So here's the way it starts. In that day, this is I don't know if this is like the fourth in that day, but we have this whole string of in that days, so this is another one. In that day, the Lord, with his sword, what kind of sword? It's hard, and it's great, and it's strong. So that's the sword. Hard, great, strong sword.
Pretty much
what's God going to do with it?
That's pretty much all the qualities you want in a sword. Maybe sharp is the other one. But other than that, that's pretty much, like, if you're looking for a sword, that's what you're looking for.
Pretty good three adjectives that you want to describe your sword. So God's got this hard, great, and strong sword in his hand. What's he going to do with it? Well, he's not going to be attacking the Edomites or the Ammonites or anybody like that. Now we're switching here to a different kind of image. With this sword, the Lord will punish Leviathan. And who's Leviathan? He's called the fleeing serpent and the twisting serpent. His name is repeated twice there. And then he goes on to say, and he will also slay the dragon that's in the sea. Now, we've encountered this a couple of times. I know we talked about this when we were in the book of Job, because Leviathan comes up a couple times there. So Leviathan is here, this dragon in the sea. He's mentioned 7 times in the Old Testament. Job chapter 3, Job chapter 41. Psalm 74 talks about God crushing the heads of Leviathan. Psalm 104 talks about Leviathan being a sea creature who's playing in the sea. And here we have Isaiah 27 using it once more. So Leviathan is part of a whole cluster of images that Isaiah and other biblical authors have co-opted and used in their own sort of way, but they've co-opted it from mythology. Just like today, people can draw names or images from Greek or Roman mythology to talk about something good or something evil. C.S. Lewis does this in his space trilogy, especially the 3rd book, where things get kind of strange. But in the 3rd book, he's drawing upon biblical imagery and mythological imagery. If you're a fan of Dante's comedy, he does this throughout the Inferno and Purgatory and Paradise. And this is a pretty common theme that Christian writers have always done, and they're doing it because the scriptures themselves have done this. So they're not, as it were, putting their stamp of approval on the veracity of mythology. They're simply borrowing these stories and these names, these images from the common parlance of the day. And here, what they represent is basically just both worldly powers as well as demonic powers. So sometimes you'll have, like Egypt, pictured as a sea monster, or the leader of Egypt pictured as a sea monster, because the sea is connected with the Gentile world. And so that you kind of have this worldly perspective, but you also have the dark forces that are represented here. In fact, the word in Greek that's used to translate dragon here, in Hebrew it's tanin, in Greek it's drakon. Drakon becomes dragon in English. So all those occurrences in the book of Revelation where you have the dragon mentioned, talking about Satan, that Greek word that's used is the same Greek word that's used to translate this Hebrew word in the Old Testament. So Leviathan, who's called a serpent, who's called a dragon, this is an image both for the powers of the world opposed to God, as well as the spiritual forces who are opposed to God. None of them stand a chance, because God has his great and strong and hard sword with which he's going to punish all of his adversaries.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to read, fleeing serpent, twisted serpent, and not connect that you're talking about the devil himself to some degree, right? I mean, this goes all the way back to the opening chapters of the Bible, where you're like, who is the serpent here? When the serpent comes up, who are we talking about? And you're like, well, this is the name for the devil. The first name for the devil is just, there's a serpent, right? This is the first title he gets, is there's a serpent. And then with the sea too, I mean, so you have the Gentile world. You also have just like the sea, and this is all over. We've brought it up many times, but being this symbol for chaos and uncertainty and all of that stuff. And so that you have like what is it that makes the sea that way? There's a dragon in there. And this is why Jesus calming the storm is a big deal. This is why Jesus walking on the water is a big deal. It's not just that people don't walk on water. I mean, that is a big deal. But there's symbolism there that is also at play that we probably don't think about. But for them, the sea is representative of of uncertainty and chaos, and it's a good place to go die. I mean, the sea is a great place to not come back from. They don't have meteorologists. They can't predict storms. Like, you could just be out there one day and bad day to be out here.
Right.
But the thing that I think is cool about this is that you have to be like, okay, so what's God saying? Like, he's going devil and chaos hunting with his sword. But the sword is just a word. I mean, we know this, that Christ has a sword in his mouth. This is what John tells us, that there's a sword in his mouth. And so it's not as though God is up there like, well, let me get my weapons out, and this is going to be a real battle. Like, no, I'm going to go and destroy the devil, and I'm going to destroy chaos and all this other stuff, and I'm just going to do it with my tongue. I'm just going to speak, and that's all. So this is not like a fair fight, as we would say. This is not. Well, you get your troops, I'll get my troops, and we'll find out what happens. He just is going. He's like, I'm going to find him. I'm going to speak to him, and that's going to be the end of it.
Yeah, there's like one great line in A Mighty Fortress. One little word can fell him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people sometimes, because people erroneously tend to read books like Revelation literally, they kind of get the impression sometimes that there's going to be an actual fight, and all the forces of heaven are going to have to give it all they got. Jesus is going to have to literally show up on a horse, and there's going to be these armies in this great battle of Armageddon. And yeah, we know we're going to win, but man, it's going to be like all-out warfare. No, I mean that's the poetic, metaphorical, visionary scene that's given to us, because that's the way the Bible speaks. But all that's going to happen is basically God is going to speak his word, just like he spoke his word and brought everything into existence, and the foes are demolished, are defeated.
Yeah. Jesus shows up on the battlefield and just says enough. And that's the end of it.
Just like when he was on the sea, peace, hush, be still. That's all it took.
Yep.
And that's the way the battle will be won. All right, so that's verse 1. Verse 2 really through 6 is going to give us a nice counterpoint to what we saw way back in Isaiah 5. Isaiah 5 is where we had the vineyard song, that famous parable of the vineyard, where God says, I planted this vineyard. I planted the choicest fruits. I cleared out everything. I built a wall. I built a watchtower. I built a vat. I mean, there's nothing I left undone. And when I went to get its fruit, instead of, good grapes, I found stink fruit. So that's the way Isaiah 5 depicts the unfruitfulness of Israel. Now we're going to have the counterpoint to that, in which you have this very positive vineyard song. So 2 through 6, let me read those verses. In that day, here's another in that day, a pleasant or a beautiful vineyard, sing of it. I, the Lord, am its keeper. Every moment I water it. Lest anyone punish it, I keep it night and day. I love this line. I have no wrath. Would that I had thorns and briars to battle. I would march against them. I would burn them up together. Or let them lay hold of my protection. Let them make peace with me. Let them make peace with me. In days to come, Jacob shall take root. Israel shall blossom and put forth shoots and fill the whole world with fruit. Man, I love that. There's so much that's there. So Isaiah 5 had this song of the vineyard, and here we have a pleasant or a beautiful vineyard that Isaiah says, sing of it. And what makes this vineyard so special? Well, it's because the Lord is the one who is its keeper. We have that verb repeated 2 times in verse 3. I, the Lord, am its keeper. And then he says, I keep it night and day. And there's like nothing that he's not doing for it. Every moment he waters it. Unless anyone punish it, he keeps it. He's the keeper, the watcher of the vineyard. And that one line is so awesome. I have no wrath.
Yeah.
I don't have a little. It doesn't say I just have a little bit. I have no wrath. That perhaps might be the line that Paul was thinking about when he wrote in Romans 8:1, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
I mean, you have God being like, all right, so I got this vineyard, and all day long, I'm watering and guarding. That's what I do. And, man, it's actually getting a little boring because there's not even so much as like a thorn or like a thistle for me to go to war with here. You know, I'm just like waiting for an opportunity to defend this vineyard, and like nothing's coming against it.
Yeah. And then he says, even if there were, say, I found a thorn and a briar. Well, I'll even make peace with them. Let them lay hold of my protection. Yeah. Let them make peace with me, and I'll turn that thorn into a vine, and I'll turn that briar into a grape. So it is kind of a funny thing. Like, man, would that I had thorns and briar. I wish that there was a thorn or briar that would dare to pop up in my precious vineyard. Man, I wouldn't just uproot it. I'd go to war against it. I'd burn it up. Yeah, so there's almost this feel of just this passionate, zealous love of the vineyard. I mean, you can't get enough of it. You can't do enough for it. And this, of course, is just a picture of the completeness of our God-given security in Christ, in the salvation He's won for us. I mean, we're in the vineyard. And I love the way it ends, too. Verse 6 is saying that in days to come, Jacob and Israel, of course, these are just different names for the community of God, Jacob and Israel, they're going to take root, they're going to blossom, they're going to put forth shoots, and fill the whole world with fruit. So if you think of the first vineyard as the Garden of Eden, just in the sense of this is God's special place, right? You got God's garden. Well, what were Adam and Eve supposed to do? Well, they were supposed to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And, well, they were supposed to Edenize the world. That was eventually what was the plan, to expand this, subdue the earth, bring it under their dominion. Well, of course, that didn't happen. So you have this image that's picked up over and over in the rest of the scriptures where God establishes a land or a kingdom or a vineyard. And eventually the goal is for that to spread from where it's at outward. That's what the book of Acts is all about, from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the uttermost ends of the earth. Well, that's exactly what's happening here in Isaiah 27, verse 6, where the kingdom of God, which is pictured as a vineyard, is going to fill the whole world with its fruit. It's expanding outward and outward and outward as the gospel progresses from place to place to place.
Yeah, and when you can't find any like thistles or briars or thorns to contend with, this makes you believe that sort of sin has just been dealt with, right? Where you're like, I mean, this is what all this is, and you're going to see him go into that where it's like, man, there's no sin to deal with here because it's already been dealt with when I spoke this word and won everything, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
There's no sin to deal with here.
Yep, I've done everything necessary to eradicate it. So all we have is a beautiful vineyard. All right, so that's first 6 verses. Now he's going to switch gears a little bit with verse 7 and following. It's kind of a strange line here. Has he struck them as he struck those who struck them? Or have they been slain as their slayers were slain? So what he's saying in this verse is, has God struck his own people in the same way that he struck the adversaries of Israel who struck Israel? Well, no, he hasn't. Or have they been slain as their slayers were slain? No, God has not dealt with Israel as he has dealt with Israel's strikers and slayers. And then he goes on, measure by measure, or whatever that Hebrew means. If you look at your notes, your commentaries on this particular word is unknown, doesn't appear anywhere else in the Bible. It's what we call the hapax. So people just kind of guess as to its meaning based upon cognate languages and things like that. But we'll just go with measure by measure. Measure by measure, by exile, you contended with them. So God did, in fact, exile his people the northern kingdom to Assyria. The southern kingdom will happen after Isaiah, but in the time of Jeremiah. Measure by measure, by exile, you contended with them. He removed them with his fierce breath in the day of the east wind. So he sent them into exile. He sent his east wind, which is always an image of discipline or punishment.
Yeah, I mean, the idea here is that, okay, you didn't strike them the same way that you struck those who struck them. You didn't slay them the same way that those who slayed Israel slayed. But it wasn't as though you didn't do anything, right? I mean, you still contended.
Yes, yeah. You contended, you disciplined. You didn't wipe them out like you wiped out other nations, but you did contend with them. And then he says in verse 9, therefore, by this the guilt of Jacob will be atoned for. So now we've moved to, how's this atonement going to take place? I mean, you got to take care of these sins somehow. There's got to be atonements. How's this going to happen? And this will be the full fruit of the removal of his sin. When he makes all the stones of the altar like chalk stones crushed to pieces, no Asherim or incense altars will remain standing. Now, there's a couple of different ways I think this can be taken. These altars or altar can be understood either as in Hebrew it's singular. So he makes all the stones of the altar like chalk stones crushed to pieces. So either you can understand this altar as an illegitimate altar, that is one of these altars on the high places, or, and this is the way that I lean, understand this altar to be the legitimate altar there at God's tabernacle or temple. Well, that altar, the stones of the altar, what's going to happen to them? They're going to be like pulverized, just crushed to pieces like chalk stones. Now, why would you do that to an altar? Because it's no longer needed. Yeah. That's why.
That does, in fact, happen.
It does, in fact, happen. Yeah. It happened decisively, in fact. We know exactly when that happened, in fact. It happened in 70 A.D. when Romans came in and they demolished that altar because it was no longer... well before then, in fact, it was no longer needed for atonement because atonement had already been effected.
Yeah, it seems to me that two things can be true at once. I take this as that altar too. That hey, how am I going to atone for your sins? Well, I'm going to make this altar unnecessary. That's how I'm ultimately going to do it. And what I'm also doing, I'm doing two things. I'm going to make this sacrificial system. I'm going to fulfill it, so it's no longer needed. And then I'm also going to deliver you from all your idolatry. So, you're not also whatever this other stuff, these incense altars, whatever. It's just going to be me. There's no more, false gods. No more sacrificial system. No more lambs or bulls or goats. None of that. Just me. That's how I'm going to remove all this sin.
Yeah, it's kind of a John 4 scenario, right? No longer shall they worship on this mountain. He's talking to the Samaritan woman. This mountain or in Jerusalem. There's no more Samaritan worship going on. There's no more Jerusalem temple worship going on. There's no more any kind of worship going on that means anything because it's all been fulfilled in Christ.
Yep.
The ultimate sacrifice. And then just to finish up this section in the couple minutes we have left, 10 and 11 goes on to now move to the very common image of a city, a fortified city, which we've seen in just recent episodes is a picture of worldly power opposed to God. The fortified city is solitary, a habitation deserted and forsaken like the wilderness. There the calf grazes. There it lies down and strips its branches. When its boughs are dry, they are broken, and women come and make a fire of them. For this is a people without discernment. Therefore, he who made them will not have compassion on them. He who formed them will show them no favor. So this fortified city is the world city. It's the image of opposition to God. And its citizens they're fools. They're fools because they reject God. They reject him as their only hope. And they will be destroyed, and the city will be uninhabited except by calves. And this is another stock biblical image. You have deserted cities, that you have owls and you have goats and you have other animals like are living where people used to live because it has been completely forsaken. So this is just one more of Isaiah heaping up image upon image upon image of what God is going to do when he steps in to rescue his people, and at the same time to destroy, here called the fortified city, in Revelation and elsewhere referred to as Babylon, just the image of worldly power opposed to him.
Sounds like some people didn't get in the safe space, and the tornado happened.
They were in the front yard filming it while the tornado came. Right, not a good place. And we got 2 more verses to go, which we'll pick up next time. That'll actually be a good way to begin next time with 12 and 13 at the end of 27. And then we're going to jump into a new section in chapter 28. We'll hear more about Ephraim and Jerusalem at that point.
All right, sounds good. Well, hopefully you will join us for that. Chad, I will certainly join you for that. I'll see you next time.
All right, see you then.